everyone.
Good morning, Dan.
Hey. Welcome. This session on Agile Data Engineering. This is going to be an introduction to Data Vault 2.0. My name is Kent Graziano. I'm the Chief Technical Evangelist with Snowflake Computing. All right. Manifesto for Agile Software Development. How many of you are familiar with this? Okay, half. Okay, half of you. All right. So this came out in the early 2000s, I think it was. I'm trying to remember exactly when it was published. But this was what started the Agile movement. As all these guys got together, and sadly, it is all guys. I don't see a woman's name on there. This is the people who wrote it. I mean, if you think this group is geeky, just see some of these guys. But this is what they came up with, that we're going to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. And this was what started the whole thing, and people talking about delivering in 2 weeks. The organizations started throwing data models out the window and saying, well, we don't do documentation in Agile, so that means we don't do data models. Yeah, no, that's not what it said. It said you have to make a choice. You do not build. How many of you remember the bookshelves of binders of requirements documents? There's a few who've been around long enough to do that, right? I mean, stop doing that. Because by the time you wrote it, it's wrong. By the time somebody signed off on it, management has changed. And the people who told you what they wanted aren't there anymore. So let's stop doing that and start building stuff that works. So in the Agile approach, there's some different concepts that replace what we used to be doing. One of the ones I like the most is this concept of user stories instead of requirements documents. And a user story is from a business perspective. As the CFO of ABC Inc., I need to see the sales numbers every month divided by region, product, and sales rep, so I can determine our go-forward budget for staffing. That's a user story. Who cares about it? What's the information they need? And most importantly, why do they need it? Because then we're going to start looking at how do we prioritize these things? How do we decide what we're going to do? Because it's a lot. Data warehousing, as you all know, there's no end of requirements. Having that business reason in there then allows you to develop what they call prioritized backlog. It's the list of requirements that everybody wants to see. But trying to get to a more iterative approach to building out the warehouse, we have to be able to list those requirements and put them in a priority order and work on our negotiating skills. So the communications talks we had yesterday were great. You know, talking to the business and say, okay, you say you want this and this and this. We can't do all of it at once. Let's look at your business reasons. You decide, as a business, what do you want first? What's the most important? What's going to drive the most value for your organization? And that's how you go about developing a prioritized backlog. Doing standard size iterations, whether it's 2 weeks or 2 months. I had an Agile data warehousing talk I gave, and I said, for us in data warehousing, if we could deliver something in 3 months, that would be more agile than what we've been doing. Right? It doesn't have to be 2 weeks to be agile. And that was a huge fight when I started talking about doing agile in the database world. It's like, well, yeah, you're not doing 2-week sprints, you're not agile. There's no Agile methodology that mandates 2-week sprints. It became a goal for people. But it doesn't mean you're not agile if you can't get to a 2-week sprint. Right? If you're prioritizing the work and the work is coming from the business and you're delivering value on a regular basis and a predictable cadence, that's what you get to Agile. So in the data warehousing world, trying to deliver increments to your data warehouse that are providing new data, maybe from new sources, maybe it's new subject areas, but providing it in an incremental manner in a way that delivers value to the business is what we're really trying to get to. Now, to do that, we need to change the way we're approaching data warehousing. And this is where the concept of agile data engineering comes in. That's really agile data modeling. And Data Vault is the approach that I've found is the most effective for doing this. So here's the definition of Data Vault. What do we mean by Data Vault? It is something very specific. It's a detail-oriented, historical tracking, and uniquely linked set of normalized tables that support one or more functional areas of business. It's a hybrid approach encompassing the best of breed, third normal form, and star schema. It allows you a flexible, scalable, consistent, and adaptable method to meet the needs of the enterprise. Dan Winstead, who is the inventor of this approach, designed it specifically, and he says architected specifically to meet the needs of today's enterprise data warehouses. So this was not it's a new approach. It was a new approach to solve, though, specifically a point problem, which was how do we model a data warehouse in a flexible, adaptable way. From an Agile perspective, and Dan invented this before Agile really was a big thing, but from an Agile perspective, they talk about refactoring code. And in the database, now we're talking about refactoring tables, right, which is a big pain in the neck. That means changing it, right? Changing the model, changing the load, enhancing it, refreshing the data, whatever it is. And that's one of the things that slowed us down. So the goals Dan had was to try to solve some particular problems. When I first started in data warehousing, I was using the Inman Method, right? Which was effectively using a third normal form modeling technique, putting snapshot dates into the primary key. So take your OLTP system, add a snapshot date to the primary key of every table in your enterprise model. Because when I started, we did monthly snapshots. We would just take the data from the OLTP system once a month and shove it in to this data warehouse structure. Of course, that only works well if you have one source system. And on top of that, if you have master detail type structures, they're normal form, you've now added a snapshot date into the primary key of each of those. And those keys cascade. So you have this snapshot date of the master is now inherited by the child. And the child, though, may have its own snapshot date because the child record may change at a different rate than the master record. And so however far down you go, you've gone from now having, we'll just go with this traditional, you're using surrogate keys everywhere, right? Nobody's using business keys. They're using natural keys. They're using surrogate keys. You now go from a one-part primary key to a two-part primary key. And the child was probably a two-part primary key already. Well, now it's a four-part because it's inherited the snapshot date from above and has its own snapshot date, and so on. And so it just grows and grows. So it became very difficult to query, doing a lot of select max snapshot dates at multiple levels. That was difficult. And if you made a mistake, changing that model meant throwing all the data away and reloading the model from your warehouse. And you certainly don't want to do that a couple years in. In the star schema world, imagine like the business didn't actually know what they wanted. And I know you've never experienced that, right? You've never experienced that. And that user story I just gave you said, I need to do my analysis by region, salesperson, and product. You build up the fact. It's probably got 4 dimensions because there's always a date dimension, right? There's always a date dimension. So you've built it with 4 dimensions. You put the reports out there, they go, great. How do I see the supplier? What do you mean? Well, I need to track my suppliers too. I want to know which supplier did I get that product from that I sold to the customer. Oh, wait a minute, we forgot about the customer too. Yeah, I was analyzing the sales guys, but I need to know who they're selling to and where the product's coming from. They just added 2 dimensions to your star schema. To get what you had with the 4 dimensions, you were aggregating. Well, now you have to disaggregate. Well, how do you disaggregate? You can't. Because you rolled it up. Traditionally, we were rolling data up into snapshots, and that's what I did. We had a month-end snapshot, we had a quarter-end snapshot, and we had a year-end snapshot, but we never kept the transactions. So when somebody wanted to see the details, you're having to re-engineer. If somebody wants a new dimension, you have to re-engineer. Back when we were only dealing with 10 gig of data, okay, probably wasn't such a big deal. Now people are dealing with hundreds of terabytes. You can't reload fast enough. You can't re-engineer fast enough. And this was causing cost increases and delays in delivering the data warehouse. So Dan wanted to solve that particular problem as well, because it just was not agile. You couldn't change as the business changed, as the priorities changed. It wasn't necessarily very easy to change the model. You could. Scott Ambler has written a great book on refactoring databases. And everybody in the room who's been doing databases for over 10 years, you've probably figured out even on your own, what do I do when the table definition changes? How do I implement a new table design? How do I move the data from the old table to the new table? There are methods for doing this, but it all takes time. So if we're going to be really agile, we need to minimize